Forget everything Hollywood ever told you about pirate feasts. Forget the roasted hams, the heaping platters, the goblets brimming with wine. The reality of life at sea during the golden age of piracy was something far darker, far filthier, and far more stomach-turning than any film has ever dared to show. Pirate meals were weevil-infested, scurvy-causing, and sometimes barely recognizable as food at all. In 1668, an English sailor named Edward Barlow scratched out a bitter complaint in his journal about Christmas dinner aboard ship. The meal was rusty salt beef, pickled in brine for 18 to 20 months, while officers grabbed the best cuts and left the crew to gnaw on rancid scraps. Shipowners of the era simply assumed that half the men who set sail on long voyages would die of scurvy before they came home. Until 1795, that 50% death rate was not a tragedy. It was a budget line. An estimated 2 million sailors perished from scurvy alone between the voyages of Columbus and the dawn of the steam age. So, pour yourself a stiff drink, brace your stomach, and prepare to learn what really hit the mess deck during the golden age of piracy. This is the truth about what pirates actually ate. Number 10. Hardtack, the tooth dullers and the worm castles. At its most basic, hardtack was nothing more than flour, water, and a pinch of salt, baked into rock-hard biscuits about 3 inches across. Each British sailor was issued a full pound of these stone-like discs every single day as a daily ration. The nicknames the men gave them tell you everything you need to know. Molar breakers, sheet iron, worm castles. That last name was uncomfortably literal. Pirates and sailors alike learned to bang each biscuit hard against the wooden table before eating it, watching as plump weevil larvae crawled out of the cracks and scattered across the wood. Royal Navy sailors developed an even cleverer trick. They crumbled the biscuits into their morning coffee, waited a moment, and then skimmed the floating bugs off the surface before drinking. The truly dead part was that a single hardtack biscuit could last for years on end, because there was nothing inside it nutritious enough to feed bacteria. It was, quite literally, food too dead to rot. Number 9. Salt horse, the rotting beef and pork stewing in the barrels below. Beef and pork were brine-cured in massive wooden barrels for months, sometimes for years on end, and the results were every bit as foul as you would imagine. Edward Barlow's 1668 journal documented that miserable Christmas dinner of salt beef pickled for 18 to 20 months. Officers always seized the best cuts for themselves, leaving the crew to wrestle with rusted, leathery gristle. The pork was often what sailors called measled, meaning it was infested with tapeworm cysts that bulged visibly from the flesh. On occasion, the stench from a bad barrel grew so unbearable that crews simply heaved the entire thing over the rail and into the sea. The bay salt cures used at the time meant the meat was technically preserved, but after long voyages, it had passed into a state somewhere between food and poison. Number 8. Salmagundi, the signature pirate dish. Now we come to something that the Buccaneers themselves prized, the legendary anything-goes salad eaten across the Caribbean. Salmagundi was a riot of ingredients, tossed together based purely on whatever the crew had managed to plunder that week. Roasted turtle meat, pork, chicken, duck, pigeon, anchovies and pickled herring, hard-boiled eggs, ripe mangoes, palm hearts, cabbage, and grapes. Everything went into the bowl and was marinated together in spiced wine and vinegar until it became one unified, pungent, gloriously chaotic feast. Salmagundi reflected the pirate way of life more honestly than any written recipe ever could. It was a dish built on theft, opportunity, and abundance. When the rating was good, the salmagundi was magnificent. When it was bad, the bowl held nothing but salt herring and stale bread. Number 7. Sea turtle, the Buccaneers' most valuable protein source. Live turtles flipped helplessly on their backs in the dark hold of a ship would stay alive and perfectly prized for months at a time, providing an unmatched supply of meat for hungry crews. A single leatherback turtle weighing over 1,000 pounds could feed 50 men for several days. Skilled hunters, known as turtleiers, haunted the Caribbean shores, hauling in 50 to 100 turtles in a single hunt. That single harvest meant well over 10 million calories of pure protein delivered to a waiting ship. Turtle meat became so prized that it eventually triggered a fashion craze in the fine dining rooms of London restaurants, where wealthy gentlemen paid extravagant sums for soup that pirates had been roasting on Caribbean beaches for decades. Out on the islands, the Buccaneers would build great fires of driftwood and roast their turtles whole upon the sand, the shells cracking open in the heat to release steaming meat soaked in its own fat. Number 6. Buccan, the smoked meat that gave the Buccaneers their very name. On the wild island of Hispaniola, French hunters chased down feral pigs and cattle that had escaped from earlier Spanish settlements and gone wild in the jungles. They smoked the meat over crude wooden frames, slow curing it for days until it became a dark, leathery jerky that could survive the brutal tropical climate. These wooden frames were called buccans, a word borrowed directly from the local Arawak language, where the term was buccan. The hunters would sell their buccan jerky to passing pirate ships in exchange for powder, shot, and rum. And over time, the line between hunter and pirate dissolved completely. The same men who once smoked meat in the forest began joining the raids themselves. The English word buccaneer comes directly from this smoked meat trade. Buccan jerky lasted for months on end aboard ship, and it fueled some of the most notorious voyages of the entire era. Number 5. Burgoo, the gluey gray sailor breakfast. If hardtack was the lunch of the damned, burgoo was the breakfast. Ground oatmeal was tossed into a great iron pot, drowned in seawater, and stirred without pause for 15 long minutes over the galley fire. Sometimes the cook drizzled in a bit of molasses for a hint of sweetness, and on lucky mornings, a lump of salted beef fat was plopped on top to melt into the gray sludge. The texture was bland, gummy, and gluey. The color was the unforgiving gray of a stormy sea. But it was cheap, it was filling, and it was one of the few things a man could choke down on the dreaded no-meat days that the Royal Navy enforced multiple times each week. Burgoo became a staple breakfast across English merchant ships, naval vessels, and pirate ships alike. Every man who sailed in those years knew the taste, and every man hated it. Number 4. Lobscouse, the catch-all sludge stew. Leftover salt meat, whatever the cook could scrape from the bottom of the barrel, was tossed into a pot along with crushed ship's biscuit. Any onions or wilted vegetables that still had a flicker of life were chucked in alongside. Then, the whole vile mixture was boiled over the galley fire until it reduced to a thick, brown sludge with the consistency of wet cement. The dish was first recorded in writing around the year 1708, though sailors had been eating it long before anyone bothered to name it. Liverpool's famous scouse stew, still cooked today, descends in a direct, unbroken line from this maritime sludge. Lobscouse was a meal designed by hunger and necessity, a dish built specifically to use every last scrap of food before it could spoil and be lost forever. Number 3. Dunderfunk, the pirate dessert brick. Believe it or not, sailors did manage to invent something close to dessert. Dunderfunk took the dreaded hardtack and transformed it into something almost pleasant. Sailors pounded the rock-hard biscuits into fine crumbs, then mixed those crumbs with beef fat, which they cheerfully called slush, along with molasses and a splash of water. The thick paste was packed into a tin and baked in the galley oven until it formed a hard brown brick. Sailors described Dunderfunk as seagoing gingerbread, and they meant it as the highest possible compliment. It was the closest thing to a sweet treat that most pirates ever tasted in their hard, salt-soaked lives. A small, rare moment of pleasure in a diet otherwise defined by rot, brine, and weevils. Number 2. Anything that swam, that flew, or that crawled. When the stores ran low and starvation began stalking the lower decks, all rules of normal cuisine were abandoned. Pirates ate sharks pulled bleeding over the rail. They ate dolphins harpooned from the bow. They ate seals and sea lions clubbed on rocky beaches. They ate penguins waddling on remote shores, monkeys snatched from jungle canopies, alligators and crocodiles dragged from murky rivers. Long fishing lines trailed behind every ship in the trade winds, hauling in cod, mackerel, and tuna whenever the weather allowed. Live chickens, pigs, goats, and cattle were herded aboard at every port, slaughtered one by one as the voyages wore on. Buccaneers cruising the Caribbean hunted iguanas in the brush and harpooned slow, gentle manatees in the shallows. Hunger had a way of erasing every familiar category of food. If it had once breathed, it could end up in the pot. And finally, number 1. Grog and the killing tide of scurvy. Half a pint of rum, mixed 4 parts water to 1 part spirit, became the official Royal Navy ration, and pirates eagerly adopted the practice for themselves. Vice Admiral Edward Vernon ordered the mix into being in 1740, and the drink was named after the grogram cloak he famously wore on deck. Pirates, never satisfied with anything plain, upgraded grog into a beverage they called bumbo, sweetened with sugar, brightened with lime juice, and dusted with grated nutmeg. Beer, ale, and rum were always preferred over fresh water on long voyages, simply because the water in the casks turned slimy and undrinkable within weeks. But behind the rum lurked the true killer of the seas: scurvy. An estimated 2 million sailors died of scurvy between the voyages of Columbus and the Steam Age, their gums blackening, their old wounds reopening, their teeth tumbling from rotting jaws. Shipowners simply assumed a 50% death rate on long voyages and budgeted accordingly. Then, in 1753, a Scottish surgeon named James Lind published a treatise that proved beyond any doubt that citrus fruit prevented the disease. It still took until 1795 for lemon juice rations to be mandated across the Royal Navy. Decades of bureaucratic indifference cost untold thousands of lives. So there you have it. Pirate cuisine was not romance. It was survival chemistry, a brutal balance of salt and smoke and rum, standing against rot and weevils and the slow creeping death of scurvy. Dinner on a pirate ship was never a feast. It was a battle fought 3 times a day, every day, until the voyage ended or the man eating it did. Drop a comment below and tell us which of these grim pirate meals you would actually be brave enough to try today, and which ones you would happily heave straight over the rail.